Welcome, my dear ones. This is Tracy Anderson Askew, your host for the Transform Your Birth podcast, changing your mind about birth one story at a time. Each week, we'll be exploring a birth story through the lens of what birth can teach us. I'll be digging deep into each story so you can learn what it is that can change the way a birth unfolds. We can't control birth, but we can influence it. So listen in to find out how. Enjoy. Ashleigh's story is one worth listening to, as it helps us to really understand the power of undisturbed birth. She shares with us the preparation she did prior to the big day and the fears she needed to address in order to surrender and work with the process of birth. She practices surrendering, cultivates a powerful mindset, and is very clear about what she can and can't control. With the support of her amazing partner, her doula, and 2 midwives, she creates the perfect conditions for birth to unfold, and it ended in a surprising outcome, which you will have to listen to find out what happened. An episode well worth the time, full of wisdom and insight into the journey we must make as women to be ready to welcome our babies. Enjoy. Welcome everyone, another week of the Transform Your Birth podcast, and with me today is the lovely Ashleigh. Ashleigh had little India almost 2 years ago, and her and a partner are pregnant with baby number 2. So, Ash, you've obviously come for a second round.
Yeah. Yeah.
Your first one must have been pretty good and worth sharing, which I think it is.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah, thank you so much for being here. So, Ash, tell us how you were feeling in your pregnancy with your first daughter and what sort of preparation you did.
So when we fell pregnant with India, we were both, I think there's like wanting to have a baby and then the actual reality of like, okay, I'm pregnant and now I have to birth this baby. I was always excited for birth, and it was always something that I really looked forward to doing. So I was definitely excited about it. But then I guess what I wasn't expecting was a bit of fear that came through about navigating birth in a medical system. I had full belief and trust in my own body's ability to birth my baby vaginally and without any assistance. But I just had this fear that I might be met with people who didn't fully trust that. And that was something that I, had to work on over that process.
Can I ask you with that, Ash, where did that belief of trust in your body come from? I'm really curious about that question because a lot of women don't have that belief.
Yeah, it's funny. My mum had 3 vaginal births. I was a forceps, episiotomy delivery, but like my mum was always pretty casual about it, like, just you can birth babies, and she didn't really have any horror stories from her births. And so I think that was, one thing, my mum's not scaring me with her birth stories and was just, like, yeah, you just get on with it kind of thing. So I think that helped. But also, as I said, I was always a bit obsessed with birth, listening to stories and really interested by people that would have these free births or home births. And so it was just that knowing that it was something that, and a feeling it's something that we're meant to do and something that we're designed to do. And so I just had that trust.
That's really interesting. So you realized that you had a bit of fear or a little bit of resistance around the medical model. What ended up unfolding in terms of the choices that you made?
So because of that fear, I was like, I want to birth at home. And then I looked into that. And as a first-time mother in Canberra, at that point in time, a home birth, a publicly funded home birth wasn't a possibility for me. It would have to be through a private home birth midwife, which is, when I looked at it, it was over like $6,000 or something. And it just, at that point in time, it is a lot of money that we were looking at potentially having to pay. And I would have paid it if I really felt that was how I was going to birth my baby. But Sam knew someone that worked in the continuity program through the Canberra hospital. And so he suggested, well, let's try this option. And maybe that's something that you'd feel more comfortable, a bit of an in-between, a bit of a compromise, I guess. And so I was okay to look into that as an option. And we got paired with our midwife, Lauren, and so we were lucky enough to get a position within the continuity program, which is, not everyone is able to. So we were really lucky with that. And then when we met Lauren, straight away, I was like, yeah, I'm so happy to birth my baby here with this midwife, because I just felt like she really heard me and supported me, and I could just tell that she had a real trust in the process of delivering a baby. So I was like, yeah, I'm cool with this.
Choosing a midwife is a bit like choosing a partner.
Yeah.
You generally know whether it's a fit or not. You
Yeah.
generally know whether there's chemistry or not. And I think it's that intrinsic, oh yeah, this is a fit, this feels good. It's a feeling, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then part of the continuity as well is that those midwives can come to your house to do your appointments, which is really nice. But I had actually requested that all of my appointments be done at the hospital, because I wanted to be really familiar with the space, and not just in like the appointment room. I wanted my appointments in the birthing center where I was going to have the baby.
Yeah, nice.
So I was familiar with the smell, just the space. So that it wasn't foreign to me when I was
so it's familiar. This is we're the same as animals. Animals are the same. They use their sense of smell and familiarity as to where they feel safe and why we think we should be different. That was a really smart thing to do, to get familiar with your space prior to the day.
Yeah.
But that's not what happened, is it? You didn't end up birthing in there, but we'll get to that point soon. So, okay, so you're in the continuity program, and that was a wonderful fit for you. You fell in love with your midwife, really important. How were you then feeling about the process of birth, and what sort of prep did you do?
We did a lot of preparation. I did also have a doula as well, which I'll speak about.
Yeah.
But from very early on in my pregnancy, I don't even think I was quite 13 weeks yet, maybe 9 or 10. I engaged a body worker I had a yoni mapping session.
Oh, wow.
Because I just felt like, I guess to explain what a yoni mapping session is, it's using a massage technique. Yoni is another word for vagina. So like an internal massage, essentially like a pressure point, almost like remedial massage.
Yeah.
Because I realized the work really needed to be on softening and relaxing my body, especially being a dancer and just other things. I know that I'm very upright and tight, and I've got a very tight pelvic floor. And so that was something that I was like, I need to work on that as step one, like the physical body to open and surrender and birth my baby. So I had that very early on, and got some exercises from that, and some points of tension that we worked on releasing. I did things like acupuncture, and my diet. I was really conscious of eating foods that at certain stages throughout the pregnancy that I knew were giving the nutrients to help support the baby's development at that point in time. There was obviously lots of bread and other things that happen along with those pregnancy cravings, but I was just trying to be really conscious in growing my baby. Also, in terms of reading books, I got onto a book by Sunny Carl. I can't think of the name of it. It's quite a spiritual book, but I really enjoyed reading that. And also Ina May's Guide to Childbirth, that in my birth Bible.
It's a brilliant book. If ever there was a book I recommend, it's Ina May Gaskin's Guide to Childbirth. It's just so much wisdom in there.
So much wisdom. And so I was really, for those first few months, just trying to fill my head with as many empowering stories as possible about birth. And that wasn't to say that they were all, undisturbed home births. Like there was a lot of learning in each of the births, and I was using stories to seek out ways to fill myself with knowledge so that if, something was to arise during birth, whether it was breech or the baby is not coming out, like just trying to have stories to help with tools in birth to help get the baby out. Other things that we did, we did engage a doula, which was something that I always knew that I wanted to have, because the midwife holds a very different role to a doula. And so for me, I felt that having a doula would help hold me in the space of that, maiden to mother transition. And I just wanted a friend or that mother role, and that's not the midwife, they've got their own role, and they're amazing. But for Sam and I, and also for Sam to have that support of the doula in that space. And so what was amazing with that? Oh, yeah.
Yes. Sorry, I was just going to just help the listeners who don't know about doulas. Doulas are like a lay midwife. They've got all the emotional and social and sort of level of care, but they don't have the medical duty of care. So they're really able to be present with women through birth. In fact, I've had many midwives say to me when I used to be a doula, "You're doing what I wish I thought I'd be doing as a midwife." But there's so many pressures on midwives with paperwork and hospital policies and certain expectations placed on a midwife about, what she can and can't do. Whereas with a doula, it's more of a social role, and you come in to support the couple, not to get between the couple, but to support the couple. They don't give medical advice. That they're not trained to do that, but what they do is hold space, which is what you're describing, and particularly giving back up to the partner, because it can be a very intense role being a partner.
Yeah, and Sam was really grateful to have our doula's support, not just in the pregnancy, but also in the way that the birth unfolded. So, and it was really great because with the doula as well, we would have sessions with her throughout the pregnancy, is the same that you do with the midwife, but with the doula, we had some guided meditations, and she helped us to set our birth intentions. And so, she was becoming like a friend throughout that process. We knew each other so well, and that's what you want. You want someone to know you well, know what makes you tick, and because when it comes to labor, and the things that can unfold in that, it's you just can't take for granted the level of trust that's required to help that mother surrender.
Yeah, absolutely. And then that continuity of relationship, we know, goes a long way into bringing out the best in the mother, the birthing mother, and creating the optimal conditions for that mother to let go when she knows she's with people who she's familiar with. That's why it's always gold standard to have continuity of a known midwife, independent midwife, or doula. They really do make a big difference.
The other thing that we did as well, which was just the best, was your birth course. I had so many friends say to me, "You've just got to do Tracy's course." And so I didn't even look into other birth courses, because I had just so many people with all, varying birth experiences, but all of them had said they were so grateful that they had done your, no matter the outcome of how the baby was born, they were just so grateful to have done your course and how much that helped them. And so I was like, okay, so I booked it, and we had it at about 32 weeks, I think, which was perfect timing for our first baby, because it really helped us. I felt like that was enough time for us to then kind of put to practice some of the things that we learned in your course as we were getting closer to having the baby. I also did prenatal yoga for the last 10 weeks of my pregnancy, which was amazing, just to connect with other mums and just have that time with the baby. And I used Amanda through the Mama Hub in Canberra. So she does a lot of, mantras and birth focused classes. So it was like birth prep. It wasn't just a yoga class. It really was birth preparation. But with your course, I guess you can ask me questions about that, but we did, we learned so much about it. And it wasn't really until your course where I was actually able to release that fear that I had around birthing in a system that I still wasn't necessarily that trustful of, even though I loved my midwife and I was really excited that she formed part of our birth team. I was still really scared that something was going to happen against my will. It seems like an irrational fear now that I was going to have an unnecessary episiotomy or, end up with with a cesarean that maybe wasn't necessary. But I felt like I was going to be so vulnerable in that birth space that I didn't want to feel like I was taken advantage of.
Yeah.
And it was through your course. I remember that when we were going around the circle and having to share our intentions, I brought up that I had that fear. And I remember you just saying to me at one point, like, if you need an emergency cesarean, you're going to be so grateful that that is something that you can have. And it wasn't until that point I realized, I had choice. And that also, if that really was something that was recommended and I felt in that moment in birth, and, I'm the one connected with the baby, it's my body, I will know what's right for us in that moment. But then I would be grateful to have that support. And it was just a way to reframe it in my own mind, that released that fear and took it to something that was like, I don't think that's going to happen, but if it does happen, then I'm sure I'll be grateful that helped deliver my baby safely.
That's quite a common fear of intervention, fear of things happening without your consent, fear of having unnecessary procedures. It's quite a common fear that I hear among women. And one of the most important, skills or tools that we need when we're walking into the birth space, particularly in a hospital system that has a whole lot of other things going on besides you and your birth, that you have the capacity to ask questions, to identify the difference between a medical necessity and a choice. And once you upskill, once you start to get a bit savvy around the system, to understand its intrinsic strengths and also its weaknesses, which is, decisions can be made based on evidence about other women that may or may not be related to you, and having the ability to ask questions to really look at, well, thanks for the risk analysis. Now let's look at this pregnancy, and ask those powerful questions. Then whatever decisions get made from a place of coming together, questioning enough to identify, yes, this is something I need, or no, I'm actually going to wait, or perhaps not even do the procedure. And it's that upskilling which helps to alleviate that fear. And what I say to women about it is, intervention is another word for help. When you need help in labour and you have access to that help, you are very, very grateful. Because imagine if we didn't have that help. Imagine if help was 6 to 8 hours away. I mean, that would be a much worse situation. And to not only identify sometimes the challenges within the systems, but also the strength of what a great safety net we have birthing in this country, with incredible facilities, with all the machines that go ping and the people who know how to use them. That can be such a relief that we have access to that. So it's about giving that fear tools and strategies to be able to make the decision, so that if you do need help, you're far more able to accept that outcome than if you didn't have those tools and you felt like things were being done to you.
And I remember you saying as well, you can't, birth is the one thing we can't control, right? You can do all the work and then it unfolds how it unfolds. But you can't control the way in which your baby is delivered, if they're delivered, if it's a cesarean or a home birth, or, to some extent you can't control that. But what you can control is how you give birth to your baby. And so you shared that story where the woman had to have a cesarean, and she was really upset about it. And the wife or the doula said to her, do you want to birth your baby in love or fear? And she had that moment where she was like, it's important to me that I birth my baby in love. So her and her husband had a smooch, and then off they went and had their cesarean. And so that then became what was front of mind. I want to have a calm and loving birth. And so rather than I want to have a vaginal birth with no
Yeah.
intervention, which was what I had been focused on the whole time. It was like, I just need to surrender to the unfolding of this birth and know that if I can birth my baby calmly and lovingly, that's what's most important to me.
Yeah. And that is what you have control over.
That is what I have control over. And so that
choice.
that was a really great thing for my partner and I to have as our kind of mantra and what we were working towards. And also he, your course, I cannot recommend it enough, especially for partners, because he got so much out of it and he was so empowered. And I was really like, he was there with me and he learned so much and he took so much on. And then I was like, okay, this is great. It'll allow me to just surrender and be vulnerable in this space and go into the birth portal. I don't have to fight for myself because he knows what's important to me and he knows the questions to ask and he can help navigate that. It's not me.
Yeah.
So, nice. And then the doula can be with me while he's having those conversations. Yeah.
Wow. So you did a big flip in there in that course, which is good. A lot of reframing, a lot of preparation for partners, and a lot of working with those deeper fears, the things inside of us that can get in the way of us truly being able to relax and allow things to happen, which is what birth requires us to do. We don't have to make birth happen. We simply need to allow it to happen. Yeah. That's cool, Ash. So tell us now about the birth. How did it unfold?
So it was the day before India's due date that I woke up at about 6 a.m. with mild period cramps. Up until that point, I hadn't really experienced Braxton Hicks, or like I wasn't really too uncomfortable. I was lucky. Actually, I should say for context, we had gone into lockdown 6 weeks prior to India's birth, which changed things a little bit for us. And I was a bit disheartened about that because in the ACT because of the lockdown, there were restrictions on how many people you could have in the birth room. I was really lucky that Sam was able to be present at the birth with the restrictions, but unfortunately our doula was not allowed in the hospital with us. But my midwife said to me, like, get your doula to come to your house. The work is done at home. Labor as much as you can at home and then come in. And so I was pretty upset that she wouldn't be able to be present at the birth because that really did feel so important to me, having her hold that space as I transitioned from maiden to mother. But it was what it was. And, we were a lot luckier than some other birthing couples who couldn't even have the birth partner in there.
Oh, God.
So, and then also at our house, we had solar hot water, which, didn't last very long. And I such like a water submersion person. If I'm having a bad day, if I'm grumpy or if I'm uncomfortable, it's like get in a warm shower, wash it off. I always feel comfortable. So I was like, water is my like number one birth tool that I'm going to use. And also knowing, so I was like to Sam, oh my God, like the whole point of me going into this hospital was the big birth tub and the double shower head. Like I have to wait until right at the end for that. So he bought this inflatable jacuzzi online and it arrived like the week before India was born. It had like bubbles, speaker. And
oh, wow.
But it had a heat pump and we set it up when it arrived and we wanted to give it a test run.
Yep. It
took like 11 hours between filling it up and getting it to the right temperature. It was 11 hours. I said to Sam, I'll have this baby before the jacuzzi's ready for me to get into. But then it was nice, like having this tub set up on our lounge room floor. We got in it and we were doing some of the meditations and birth practices, like visualizing, we're in labor. And it was a really beautiful thing to do, when you're at home and you've got these long days in lockdown with, And then I started to say like, oh gosh, wouldn't it just be nice if I could do it here? And Sam was like, yeah. And I was like, but actually, just started to be like, gosh, this would be so good. So that's just for some context, I guess. So then, the morning that I woke up with those period pains, it was about 6 a.m. and I'd organized to go for a walk with my friend at 8 o'clock that morning. And I was just laying in bed and I thought, you know what, I'm just going to cancel the walk. But I didn't really think, or I didn't want to get too excited that I was in labor because I knew that well, I'd kind of anticipated I'd go overdue being a first-time mum. And, as I said, I hadn't really had too much of that fake labor. So I thought maybe this is just that. And then at about 7:30, I said to Sam, like, oh, I do have these period cramps and I'm not sure. We won't get too excited, but we'll just see what happens. And then at 9 o'clock, so I've got two stepdaughters. Sam has two daughters, Ava and Sienna. They were 10 and 12 at the time, or 9 and, yeah, anyway, about 10 and 12 years old. And so we woke them at 9 o'clock and said to them, because at that point it was like, okay, I think these might be turning into mild contractions. So we woke them up and said, oh, we think something's happening. And they were so excited because they really wanted to be present. And we did want them present in the early stages of labor. So it was really great that they were at our house. And the night before, Ava was massaging my belly, saying, okay, baby, like, we're ready to meet you. Come out whenever.
Oh, wow. She called the baby in.
Yeah. Although we did make love that night, and I was like, I think the baby's coming. So
well, there's a few
don't tell her
signals for
that
Bobby
bit.
to come. Yeah, how beautiful.
I mean, we were doing all the things to try and encourage labor at that point.
Yeah.
And then we decided to go for a walk just around our neighborhood, which was really nice. And I was gathering some flowers. And towards the end of the walk, the contractions were definitely, I would have to stop and kind of just breathe through them. I could still talk. I also had this appointment that I'd booked this time for this phone call. And so I took it while I was on the walk because I thought, gosh, if I have the baby, it's going to be forever. So I'm like in early labor, talking to this person on the phone, having to stop to breathe through like a mild contraction. And anyway, I just was like, I had one less thing off the to-do list. Like, if I'm having this baby, I need to clear it out. And then when we got home, the girls, it was something that we were doing through lockdown, but you put on a Just Dance on YouTube and you follow the actions in the arms. And it was something that we were just doing, as fun as a family. And Ava was like, let's do a Just Dance, because one of the stories that I was learning, it was like, obviously the better energy and the happier and more positive vibes you can bring, better endorphins, it encourages labor along. So we put on a Just Dance and I got on the birth ball and we all picked our characters and they're all dancing around me and I was bouncing on the ball doing the arms and we're just laughing and having
lovely
fun. And then Sam had said a couple of times, like, should I set up the birth pool? But I was like, no, like, I don't want to jump the gun. Like, I may not be in labor. And then at some point, the time's all a little bit warped, but he was like, okay, I'm going to set up the birth pool. And I was like, okay, I think that's a good idea. So he was boiling like every pot that we had in the house and the kettle, and, filling that up in the tub, trying to heat it up as quickly as possible for me. Because it had taken 11 hours the first time. So he was doing that in between, contractions. And it was really nice having Ava and Sienna there. Sienna kind of took on the role of timing the contractions, and then Ava would massage my back. So as soon as I'd start to have a contraction, Ava would call out, like, she's on. So Sienna would press the app and Sam would come over, and it was really beautiful. Having them involved in those early stages.
What a gift to those two girls, Ash.
Yeah.
See, birth is such a normal thing, not some scary thing that you see on TV, but to just be a part of it being a family event, that's wonderful.
And, during the contractions, like, I was quite vocal and active, like stomping my feet or squatting and, the sounds that come out. But then afterwards, I was able to be like, okay, that was one done, like another one to come soon. I'm okay, just like reassuring them, which was also helping to reassure me. And then I decided to make cookies. I don't know. The doula was like, need flour, like, it's really good for birth prep.
Let's bake.
Like, okay, I'm going to make cookies, which was a terrible idea, kind of, because at that point I was not capable of making cookies. So between contractions, I was trying to tell Ava, like, crack the egg or mix the flour. And uh, and then they did start to kind of ramp up. And I remember, during every contraction, I was really trying to visualize like soft hands, soft mouth, soft tummy. I was visualizing breathing the baby down, which did make them feel a bit more intense because I could feel the baby on my cervix. But I had a friend say to me, like, they will come to an end. Do not resist them. The more you resist, the more you will have. And so that was,
wow.
I knew they'd only go for a minute, and I knew it would come to an end. And it was one down, which was one closer to me holding my baby. And so that was something that I kind of kept going through my mind during those contractions to kind of keep me focused and surrendered to them. They did start to get pretty intense at around maybe 12, 1 o'clock ish that day. And well, they must have become more intense because Sienna started to be like, are you okay? Like, do we need to check in with the midwife? Have you told her? And I couldn't really respond to her. And I was starting to feel frustrated, like, everyone shut up. I can't answer these questions. Like, I'd lost the ability to communicate, I guess.
Yeah.
During contractions. And even afterwards, I felt myself heading into this space, but I couldn't really ask for that from anyone. And so I took myself outside because I just thought, like, this house is getting too stuffy. I need to get out here. And so I was outside just like stomping my bare feet on the earth and just like, come on, Mother Earth, like, hold me through this. And I started to vomit at that point as well. And so Ava, I was really grateful. She said to Sam, I think it's time we go. And so he called their mum to come and get them, which was really perfect timing because I had started to feel like they were becoming quite intense. And after the girls left, I was still outside laboring, but I really felt like I was starting to get in my own way, like, oh, these really hurt, and starting to resist them. So I went inside and laid down in bed. And whilst that wasn't the most comfortable place to labor, it allowed me to really relax in my body. And it was a really beautiful part of my labor because Sam put on, some nice like meditation music that we had been listening to. And he was just kind of in there laying with me and rubbing my back. And we were in there for probably like an hour or two together. And I really feel like that's where my body probably did the most work in opening. And then after that, I went into the shower. I was in and out of the shower a little bit. And then I was sitting in front of the heater in our lounge room. And this was about 4 o'clock in the afternoon. And I actually realized, like, oh my gosh, I have to tell my business partner that I'm in labor. So I somehow managed to send her a text message saying, activate Ash in labor plan, which was like, divert all phone calls and emails. So I did that. And then, I was just sitting in front of the heater and I thought, oh gosh, I'm tired. Like at this point, I just like a little timeout, a bit of a nap. I was feeling tired from the contractions. And it was at that point that Sam reached out to our doula because he realized we probably needed some assistance to progress. And so she came over, and I do remember like just closing my eyes because I was very inwards at this point. And I remember seeing like flashes of gold kind of go across my eyelids. And I was like, I'm going to meet my baby soon. And that was, uplifting and exciting. And I saw my doula walk up the steps and I started to get a bit emotional. Like, when you're sick and you just want your mum.
Yeah.
But I actually quickly caught that thought, and I was like, she's not here to take me out of this. Like, she's not going to save me. I have to get through this, and she's here to support me. So I didn't let that, I got like the quivering lip, like, oh my God, she's come to save me. And I caught that thought and kind of reframed that, like, no, she's here to support me and help me get through this. And it was amazing. As soon as she came in, she just knew exactly, like, she didn't say anything. She just was on the ground next to me, massaging my back. And I was just like, oh, this is what I needed, but couldn't ask for because you can't really speak. I'd really lost the ability to speak at that point.
Yeah.
And then I tried to get in the bath the tub on our lounge room floor. I really wanted to get in, and Sam had kind of said it wasn't ready, but I tried to get in, and I had a contraction in knee-deep, lukewarm, cold water, and that was like the painful contraction. It's like, quick, get out of the tub. So there was a bit more laboring to do until that was ready. But once the tub was ready, like, I just submerged into that bath, and I just felt the release, like, I was so much calmer, and just being in that warm water, it was really soothing to me, and it helped me to relax a little bit more, because earlier on I could really enjoy the rest between the contractions, but the closer they kind of came together and the more you've done and the tighter you are, I found it harder to kind of rest during them.
Yeah.
And what was really nice about this jacuzzi was that it had a heat pump. So I found the heat pump, and I was, kind of leaning over the edge of the tub, and the heat pump was on my tummy, which was really nice. And then I started to notice that the sun was setting. So it must have been around 5:30, 6 o'clock. And I had this thought, like, oh my God, this cannot go on for like another 10, 20 hours, because that was another thing I was kind of mentally preparing myself for throughout the pregnancy, because I had so many friends that had 20, 30-hour labors, that was potentially how long mine was going to take. So at that point, I just thought, oh my God, it's only been like, 10 hours. It can't go a whole nother day. Like, how am I going to do this? And I had this thought, like, this is why women ask for epidurals. It wasn't me being like, give me a goddamn epidural, I can't do it. It was just this, like, if it was going to go for another 20 hours, how would I stay relaxed?
That's that time thing that crept in, isn't it? It's one of the biggest things I tell partners is keep time out of it. So don't tell her how long she's been in labor. Don't mention breakfast, lunch, or dinner. Don't let her look at the clock, because it gets women into this, how much longer do I have to keep going thinking, which is what crept in at that point when you saw the sunset.
Yeah.
That sense of, okay, so maybe I've got another 10 or 20 hours to go.
Yeah.
And that's what takes women out of that zone of timelessness, because typically women don't have any sense of time, and that gets enhanced through a hormone called the endorphins. They put you into a sense of timelessness, and the way we interfere with that is when we start to tell women that they've been in labour for 10 hours, or they've got another 10 hours to go, and nobody really knows that, or women just get a sense of, the sun is setting, or why is my partner eating dinner? That must mean, all of those little seeds can come into the mind and cause the mind to start to question, how much longer do I have to keep going? It's really interesting. Yeah. How did you come through that then, Ash?
Well, it wasn't really, it was more just funny to me, and I shared it because I was so adamant, like, I really didn't want to have an epidural. And Sam was like, what if you asked me for one during labor? And I was like, don't let me have it. And he's like,
poor Sam.
How do
I say no to you at that point?
I was like, do what Tracy said, take me to the toilet, distract me. So it was just funny to me in that moment, having that thought, like, I didn't want one, but I was like, oh, I can see why you might ask for one. Which beforehand I'd been really stubborn on, like, don't need it.
Bit humbling, isn't it? The old
it was
process.
a humbling moment. I guess why
I
share that little bit of insight into the thought of mine in labor. I had I guess at that point too, I had started to think, like, surely I'm further ahead than where I could be. My contractions, even though they were, like, I guess, that scale that you get to measure them, they have to be, a minute long, 2 to 3 minutes apart for like 3 hours or something before maybe you'd go into the hospital. Mine were really, I had really good gaps in between my contractions, even 4 to 5 minutes. And my contractions were generally about 45 seconds long. Some were maybe a minute, and they were really, like, a little bit irregular. And so my midwife, Sam had been keeping her updated on how I was progressing and how the contractions were going. And she was really encouraging, like, you're doing really well, stay at home. And also because it was lockdown, it was such a rigmarole to get into the hospital, through all the testing and everything that we
Oh,
had to do.
God.
So, we didn't want to go in and have to be sent home or go into it and was stuck there for ages. So we were really, I guess being like going off the general rule, like it was too early to go in, and there was still more work to do at home. It took a few contractions, but eventually I was able to say to Sam, I want to be checked. And my doula said, why is that? And I said, because I can't go into the hospital. Like I couldn't move. Like I just felt like I couldn't get out of that tub. Like the baby was coming. And so I think she realized, she'd witnessed birth how many times, that I probably was further ahead than anyone anticipated. Sam was on the phone to Lauren, and I remember kind of half hearing that conversation with our midwife. And there was another midwife in the area who she said, okay, I'll get Xaviera to come and check you, so that we didn't have to, go into hospital and, potentially be there too early or be sent home. Between that phone call and when Xaviera arrived, my water broke and I started feeling like I needed to push, and I was resisting the urge to push because I'd read stories about, if you're pushing too early and you're not fully dilated, then you can inflame your cervical lips. I had all this going through my head, like all of a sudden for a moment I was like, actually, I just want a midwife to confirm what I know to be true about my own body. But I guess I wasn't, because I was entrusting a midwife with the care of, me during the birth. I really just wanted someone to affirm what I guess I already knew. When she got there, she checked me and she confirmed that I was fully dilated, and, Bub's head was there. And she did say now would be the time to go to the hospital. And I said, no, I'm not going. And Sam said to her, like, what do you want me to do? And she said, well, it would probably be too late. And so then an unplanned home birth was underway. But because she had come from just checking another pregnant woman and not expecting to deliver a baby at someone's house, she didn't have anything to physically support me if I needed any assistance with the birth. So that was something that she explained, and I was like, yeah, that's fine. I'm fine. You're just not like in your logical brain. And I just was so connected with my baby. And that was something as well. We were really focused on the breath. I haven't really touched on the breath throughout this, but we were really using breathing as our number one tool to stay calm and also to allow me to stay connected with the baby. And so I just felt that the baby was fine and I was fine. And I was not scared whatsoever that the midwife didn't have something to help me should we need. I don't even know what she would have to help me, but, she said, I've got nothing to support you with the home birth. So the ambulance was called, and Sam then got in the tub because that was something that was really important to me. I really wanted the one to receive our baby first, because, well, for a few reasons. I think that that's so beautiful that his hands are the first hands to touch our baby. And also I wanted, if I needed a moment once the baby was born, I wanted him to be holding the baby and then to give them to me. We didn't know we were having a girl at that point. It was a surprise. And so he got in the tub, and the pushing, I actually really liked the pushing bit. We had done the perineal massage and everything, so it was a really familiar sensation, and I was all of a sudden really like motivated, inspired. I'm gonna get this baby out, like this is gonna be over soon. And so I was really going with those rushes, with the pushes to get the baby out. And Sam, he kind of checked me with the mirror and said to me, you've got some more opening to do. And I was so glad that he said that, because had I have gone with those rushes and just, forcibly pushed that baby out, I would have torn myself probably quite badly. Like I really wasn't opened enough yet to bring the baby through. So I was really grateful that he said that to me, because then I was able to just kind of breathe through those rushes and let my body push, but I wasn't pushing, if that makes sense. Like my body was pushing, but I wasn't giving assistance to that. So
just letting it happen.
Yeah, so then what was happening is my body would kind of push the baby down and I could feel the stretching. And then um, and I would visualize like breathing myself really soft during that rush. And then in between, the baby would kind of come up a little bit or pull back a little bit from the stretching. So it was just really gentle on my body.
Oh.
And I mean, the ring of fire is the real deal, right? Like it did burn a few points. And I remember when we were doing the perineal massage one night, it was really quite uncomfortable. And I said to Sam, like, what are songs that are to do with fire? I was trying to sing to distract myself. And also, like, you know, just have a bit of a laugh, because I did read one story about a woman that practically laughed her baby out. That works for. And so at one point during the pushing, I tried to sing the Katy Perry song, This Girl Is on Fire, but I sung like, This vag is on fire. And no one heard me say that. And I said to Sam afterwards, like, I did say it. And he had actually set up, I bought this little tripod that arrived like a few days before I went into labor, because I had a friend say, just film it, like just film it. You'll want to watch it back. And I said, anyone, buy a little tripod and film the birth. I'm really glad we did that. But I actually found on the video, like, you can hear me say that line.
Yeah.
But then eventually, and right as I could feel her moving down, I remember all of a sudden, like, in my lower back became really quite, I don't know if cramp's the right word, but I really needed Sam to push so hard on those two backbones, some of those last kind of pushes. And then there was this moment where I was like, oh my God, her head is coming out. And it did, like, it, you know, her head came out of me. And it was really, really beautiful, because there was a good few minutes between when her head came out to when she was born. But Sam was there, like, holding her head, and I could hear him say, like, you're in my loving hands, you know, we're here to, makes me want to cry. It was like, it was really so beautiful that was how he was welcoming our baby. And, you know, he said to me, the baby's got dark hair. And, you know, it was just like, oh, this is so wonderful. And then the midwife had said to me, come up on your knees a little bit, because I was quite low down, which I do know, but, you know, in the moment, it was actually shortening how much space we had in my pelvis. So just coming up on my knees a bit helped to open me up. And it was not even on a contraction. She just slipped out of me, for better use of a word.
Wow.
And so Sam was holding her, and because it wasn't on a contraction and neither of us had said anything, there was just this moment where she had come out of me but was still underwater. And that was something that we really wanted to gently, and this was part of the reason I wanted a water birth, was because I felt like that was a really gentle transition from my body to the world, just having that, like, in between moment for her. And so Sam kind of held her there for a moment, and then Xavier realized she'd come out. And so she was, you know, encouraging us to bring the baby out of the water, which I wasn't stressed, because I know that as long as the umbilical cord is submerged underwater, like, she wasn't breathing yet. There's been stories of babies that stay there for like up to 10 minutes or something.
It's still breathing through the cord.
Yeah. And so then Sam lifted her up to me, and I put her on my chest and kind of turned her over my arm, just so that, you know, she could spit out any mucus. And she let out a big squawk. And, you know, we were just like, I cannot explain the joy that I felt in that moment, and the relief, like, you know, she was out of me and I had done it. And I just kept saying, oh my God, we did it. Like, I was just so proud of us. And, you know, we crying and laughing and kissing each other and kissing this baby and just saying, like, we love you so much. You're so safe. Like, thank you for choosing me. It was, yeah, I'm so glad it was captured on camera and we can watch that back, because it's just such a special moment. And the ambulance arrived like a few minutes after she was born, which was amazing. So they just like walked into my lounge room, and They were like, oh, hooray. And so then they went back out the front of the house. And Sam told me that it was a girl, which was so exciting because we didn't know, and lots of people had said that I was having a boy with the old wives' tales. So it was really like a nice surprise that I was having a girl. And then my midwife, Lauren, she, because of the pandemic and the lockdown, and there were actually people that night that had COVID in the birth ward, instead of getting us to go into hospital, she actually went to hospital to get everything, to cut the cord and, all the paperwork. And she brought that to my house because,
how wonderful.
yeah. So Xavier got us out of the tub. We had a few minutes in there and India was fine. She was breathing and we were all fine. But then she did get me out of the tub after a few minutes because she wanted to check me. And obviously I needed to still birth the placenta, which you kind of forget about in that moment. Like once you've got the baby, you think it's done. So I stood up and we went to get out of the tub. And I walked into our bedroom and I didn't even make it to the bed. I just like squatted and the placenta came out of me. I couldn't really stop it. Which, because we weren't planning on a home birth, there's no drop sheets. So we had the placenta and all the blood that comes out all over our bedroom floor. It was quite the scene.
Your marks of motherhood in your bed.
Yeah. But then I got tucked into bed and checked, and as I said, I was fine and India was fine, so we didn't have to go to the hospital. We had over an hour of delayed cord clamping while we waited for Lauren to come, with the tools to do that. And yeah,
what a story, Ash. This is a story of what Sarah Buckley calls undisturbed birth. It's such a good term. It's that, when we don't disturb the mother, even going to hospital is a disturbance of labour. And so ultimately you were completely, you were able to roll with each phase and stage of labour in the place where you ultimately felt safe, which was at home. And it's interesting how you had those fears initially, worked with those fears, and being able to be okay in the hospital system and to see it in a much more constructive mindset, and then ultimately ended up birthing at home, which is so interesting. So interesting.
Yeah.
Ash, what did you learn about yourself going through that?
Well, I guess a few things. Like I learned the power of really listening to myself and trusting my own inner voice and letting that guide me in a birth sense. There's all the stats and you can be told all the things, but just the power of my own intuition and trusting my body and the outcome that had. But also for birth, it is so important to do the work. Like we didn't just fall pregnant and then turn up on birthday and have this amazing home birth. Sam and I really put in the effort to preparing ourselves physically and mentally to birth this baby lovingly and calmly, and that with a little bit of luck resulted in the birth that we had. As I said, it was kind of divine timing with the lockdown. Had the doula and the birth tub not been at my house, I probably would have got in the car and gone to hospital. So there was a little bit of luck in that. But just how important it is to do the work, to release your fears and prepare whatever your fears are to release them. Because I had no fear during birth. Like there was none. I had done the work on, and I spoke about the breath. I had breath work sessions throughout my pregnancy as well to bring up fears that I had, to release them, so that come labor, those little things that are stored in the back of my mind, like they weren't going to come out. I had nothing. I was just totally surrendered to it.
I love what you've said about doing the work. I think as complex beings that we are, we're not as primal and instinctive as, say, other animals. We have these complex brains, which mean that often we have fears, like you're describing, sitting in our mind, which are there to protect us. That's ultimately what a fear is there for, to protect. But when it comes to birth, there's no place for fear in the labour room, because that's what gets in the way of labour. When women are fearful in labour, they produce cortisol and adrenaline and other stress hormones, which get in the way of those natural performance enhancing hormones. And so by doing the work, both you did the body work, you did the mind work, you did the mental work, you did Sam did the work on being prepared for where he was, and you created the perfect conditions for you to be able to surrender on the day, to be able to work with the birth, to be able to stay in that zone of labour land. Even I loved listening to you talking about second stage, such beautiful detail on not necessarily with those big rushes, wanting to sort of put force behind it, but to just breathe gently, to let your body open and not have the same sort of pressure on your perineum that happens when we coach women to push and push and all this sort of business. You had the time and the space to just let your body do it, and people around you trusting that you could do it as well, even though it was an unplanned home birth. Your midwife, both Xaviera and Lauren, were able to just trust that, oh no, she's got this, even though she's a first-time mother. We don't tend to trust first-time mothers. I don't know why. It's like their bodies are different to second-time mothers. No, they're not. They've still got that coding of birth inside of them. So you really had the perfect conditions around you, and so much love, so much love, which generates lots of oxytocin, which is part of that hormone that supports the process too.
And not just doing the work, but having the birth team that's going to best support you to deliver your baby. And I kept saying throughout my pregnancy, oh, I feel like I've got the A team, like between Sam and our doula, Becky, and our midwife, Lauren. I just felt like each of them were really confident in their role of who the role in my birth team. And they all worked together so nicely. We had times where we were all together and, in the lead up to the birth, and they each held me so beautifully throughout, so trusting. And I really just the value of having a doula there, when Sam was off trying to navigate the phone calls with the midwife and then the ambulances, I was never left alone. Like if he had to go off and do something like that, straight away, Becky was there with me with the breath, reminding me to keep breathing and massaging. So I was never left alone or pulled out of my birth place. And that really allowed Sam to do what he needed to as well.
Amazing. What would you share with a pregnant woman? What sort of advice would you give?
Protect your space. I think it would be one thing I would share. As soon as we're pregnant, everyone wants to give you all of their advice and share all the stories, and as good of intentions as people can have, it's not always the most empowering information to hear. And so really setting those boundaries of what information you'll let in, because you'll have to do the work. You'll have your own fears that you need to release, but then you don't need people projecting their own stuff onto you, because then you have to get rid of that as well. But really going inwards and thinking about what's most important to you, and finding ways that you can find the right birth team for you. And if something doesn't feel right, make a change. Trust your gut.
And do the fucking work.
Do the fucking work.
That's one of the things we say in the course. Do the fucking practices.
I remember you saying that when we came home, and we were like, we're going to do the fucking work. And so we put meditations on at night.
Oh, thank you so much, Ash. What a super story in helping us to understand what are the prime conditions for birth to unfold in the way it's designed to unfold, and how also we can get in the way of that, and you being able to navigate with that awareness that you had to protect your space, to do the preparation that felt right to you, to do the work, absolutely do the work, and to bring you into a state of birth readiness that wasn't based on attachment to your birth being a certain way, but choosing love
Mm.
It's your sort of operating system, which is something you do have control of, and just letting go for the rest, which is basically in the hands of the birthing goddesses, or however you want to describe it, in the hands of fate, is really the perfect mindset to go into birth with. So there's so much wisdom in this episode. I hope you've really enjoyed it. It is a bit longer, but it's worth every minute of hearing someone as aware and conscious as Ash, sharing such an intimate, private, beautiful moment with the rest of us. Thank you, Ash, for being here and sharing your story. And for everybody listening, we'll see you again next week. Thanks for listening. Bye. Wow. This episode has been brought to you by Transform Parenting, an organisation that provides courses, coaching and community from pregnancy through to the first 7 years of a child's life. It is a place where you can learn, get support and grow into your role as a parent. Our Transform Your Birth course, both in Canberra and online, is waiting for you to feel calmer and more confident to give birth and change the way you labour. Or why not watch our free masterclass on Keeping Relaxed and Excited About Birth, where we discuss the 3 most important things that can change a birth. You'll find us at our website on www.transformparenting.com.au.